I've been working at the Grayfield Regional Transit Authority Depot for about 6 years now. Night shift, mostly. I started on days, like everyone does. But I switched over after my second year because nights paid a differential of $4.18 an hour more. And at the time, I was trying to keep up with child support and a car payment on a Tacoma that was worth less than what I owed on it. You make choices like that, and they become your life. I don't mind nights anymore. I haven't for a long time. But I need to say that up front because people hear night shift, and they already start filling in the blanks with things that aren't true. It's not scary. It's not lonely in the way people imagine. It's just work, shifted 12 hours sideways. The depot is on Beaumont Road, south end of the city, past the last of the strip malls, and about a quarter mile before the municipal recycling center. It's a flat concrete lot, maybe 3 acres, with the maintenance garage on the east side, the dispatch building on the north, and the fuel island between them. There are 41 bus bays arranged in rows. At night, most of them fill up as the routes end. My job title is yard coordinator, which means I handle the buses as they come back and logging return times, checking the driver's end of shift sheet, doing the walkthroughs. The walkthroughs are the main thing. Every bus that comes back to the depot gets walked before it's parked for the night. You start at the front, work your way down the aisle, check under every seat, check the back bench, check the wheelchair securement area, check behind the rear exit doors. You're looking for left behind property, damage, biohazard, vomit, blood, needles, anything like that. You tag what you find, note it on the sheet, and if it's biohazard, you flag the bus for the cleaning crew before it goes back out in the morning. Most of the time, you find nothing. Sometimes a phone, a bag, an umbrella. Once in a while, something odder. I found a full gallon of milk once, just sitting upright on a seat like someone set it there and forgot they existed. Found a kid's shoe. Found an entire chess set. The nice kind, wooden, laid out mid-game on the back bench with the pieces still standing. You learn not to think too hard about it. People leave things. It's what they do. The routes come in staggered, starting around 9:30 at night and running through till about 1:15. The last route in is Route 313. That's the one I need to talk about. Route 313 runs the longest loop in the system. It starts downtown, heads south through Grayfield proper, then swings east along Dutton Road through the rural stretch. Farmland, a few unincorporated communities, a trailer park called Brayburn Estates that's not really an estate of anything, and loops back west through the Harkin corridor before terminating at the depot. Total runtime is about an hour and 40 minutes. The last departure from downtown is at 11:10 p.m., which puts the bus back at the depot between 12:40 and 1:15, depending on traffic and whether the driver had to wait out any timing holds. Most of the other coordinators don't like waiting for 313. It's the last bus, which means you're just sitting in the dispatch office or walking the lot with nothing to do for sometimes 45 minutes between the second to last bus and 313. Some of the guys would try to swap shifts to avoid it. I never minded. I'd use the time to do paperwork or eat or just sit in the office and listen to the radio. I'm not someone who needs to be moving every second. The driver on 313 for most of the time I've been on nights was a guy named Gerald Maines. Older guy, maybe 63, 64. Quiet. Professional in a way that most of the younger drivers aren't. He'd have his sheet filled out properly every time. He'd pull into his bay straight and he'd give you a nod when he stepped off, and that was it. We didn't talk much, but I liked him. You work nights long enough, you appreciate the people who don't make your job harder. Gerald retired in March of last year. After that, 313 rotated through a few different drivers. That's normal. New drivers, or drivers who transferred in, usually get the undesirable routes until they build seniority. The rural loop, last run of the night, that's bottom of the list. The first thing I noticed and I want to be careful about how I say this because I don't want to make it sound like it was immediately strange, was a change in what I was finding on the walkthroughs. With Gerald driving, 313 would come back clean probably 4 nights out of 5. Maybe a newspaper, maybe a coffee cup. Gerald kept a tight bus. After he left and the rotation drivers started, I figured I'd find more stuff, because newer drivers don't always enforce the rules the same way. And some of the passengers on the rural stretch are. I'll just say they're not always in great shape, drinking sometimes, living rough. But what I started finding wasn't like that. It wasn't more trash or more forgotten items. It was. I'm going to call them wrong items. And I know that sounds like I'm building towards something, but I don't have a better word for it. The first one I remember specifically was a pair of reading glasses sitting on the seat about 3 rows from the back, left side. Wire frames, small lenses, old-fashioned looking. That's not unusual by itself. But they were sitting perfectly centered on the seat, arms folded, lenses up. Not like someone took them off and forgot them. Like someone placed them there with intention. And when I picked them up, the lenses were warm. Not room temperature. Warm, like they'd just been on someone's face. But I'd watched the bus come in. I'd watched the doors open. Nobody got off except the driver. I would have seen a passenger. The bus was empty. I tagged the glasses and put them in the lost and found bin. Didn't think much of it for the rest of the night. But it stayed with me in a low-grade way. The kind of thing you think about on your drive home and then forget about by the time you wake up. About a week later, maybe 8 days. I didn't write it down. I wish I had. I found something else on 313's walkthrough. This time, it was a scarf, dark green, wool, or something like wool, draped over the back of a seat near the middle of the bus. Again, not wild by itself. But the bus was empty when it pulled in. And the scarf was damp, not like rain damp, but like someone had been wearing it and sweating into it. It was warm too, body warm. I held it for a second too long and then dropped it on the seat and finished the walkthrough faster than I usually do. After that, I started paying more attention. Over the next few weeks, I found a single leather glove, left hand, on the floor near the rear door. A small Bible with a cracked spine, open face down on a seat. The pages wrinkled like they'd been turned by wet fingers. A tin of mints, the old-fashioned kind with the sliding lid, half empty, sitting on the window ledge. A wool cap. A folded newspaper from a town I didn't recognize. The Harkin County Register, which as far as I know, doesn't exist. I looked it up. There's no publication by that name, active or defunct, in any database I could find. Every item had the same quality. They felt used, recently used. They carried warmth or moisture, or the impression of a body. They were always on 313. And the bus was always empty when it came in. I want to be clear about that, because it matters. I am the one who does the walkthrough. I board the bus within 30 seconds of it pulling into the bay. The driver steps off. I step on. There is no gap. There's no time for someone to slip out. And the depot lot is lit. Not well, I'll grant you. The lights on the south end are spaced too far apart, and 2 of them have been out for months. But it's lit enough. I would see a person. I would see movement. I've been doing this job for 6 years. You develop a sense for whether a bus is occupied. You feel it the moment you step on. Whether the air has been breathed recently. Whether there's a human weight to the silence. These buses felt occupied, but they were empty. I didn't report it. I want to be honest about that too. I didn't report it because what would I report? I'm finding lost items on a bus. That's not a report. That's Tuesday. The fact that the items felt warm, that they seemed placed rather than forgotten. That's my interpretation. That's not something you write on a form. I've seen guys get sent to EAP for less. So I kept logging the items and putting them in lost and found and keeping my mouth shut. Then the smell started. Not every night, but maybe 2, 3 times a week. When 313 came in and I boarded for the walkthrough, there was a smell on the bus that I couldn't place. It wasn't a bad smell exactly. It was complex. There was something like old wood in it and something like damp wool. And underneath both of those, something organic that I want to call sweetness, but that's not right either. It was the kind of smell that makes you think of a specific place without being able to name the place. Like it was pulling at a memory that didn't belong to me. The smell was strongest in the back third of the bus. Always the back third. I started noticing that the items I found were migrating backward, too. Early on, they'd been scattered. Middle, front, various rows. But over time, almost everything was showing up in the last 8 or 10 rows. I didn't track this carefully at first. I only recognized the pattern looking back. I talked to the drivers, not directly about what I was finding. I didn't want to sound like I was accusing them of not clearing their bus, because that's a write-up situation, and I'm not that guy. I just asked casual questions. How's the route? Anything unusual? Any trouble on the rural stretch? Most of them gave me nothing. Fine, quiet, easy. One guy, a younger driver named Pratt, mentioned that he didn't love the Dutton Road stretch late at night because there were sections with no streetlights and the road was narrower than it should be for a 40-foot bus. He said the stop at Braeburn Estates was depressing. No shelter, just a sign on a post. And sometimes people would be standing there at 11:30 at night in the dark, and it would startle him when his headlights caught them. But that was it, normal complaints. I asked Pratt once if he ever had anyone ride all the way to the depot. He said no, never. The last regular riders usually got off at Harkin Road or the Dutton Pryor intersection. By the time the bus hit the last 3 stops before the depot return, it was empty. He said he'd check his mirror and confirm it before pulling in. So the bus was empty when it left the route. And it was empty when I boarded it. But someone had been on it. Something had been on it. I don't know how to bridge that gap, and I've stopped trying. Around October. This was last year, so about 6 months after Gerald retired, and maybe 2 months after I first noticed the items. I found something on the walkthrough that changed things for me. It was a coat. A man's overcoat, dark gray, heavy wool. It was lying across the back bench seat, spread out almost flat. Arms extended to the sides, like someone had laid it out to display it. It was the kind of coat you don't see much anymore. Long, structured, with wide lapels and a belt at the waist. It looked old. Not vintage store old, but actually old. Like it had been worn for decades by someone who took care of it. It was warm. Not residual warmth, not ambient warmth. It was warm the way a coat is warm when someone has just taken it off. And when I picked it up, I don't know why I picked it up. I should have just tagged it. There was a weight to it that wasn't right. Not heavy, but distributed wrong. Like the coat still remembered the shape of the person who'd been wearing it. The shoulders held their form. The arms didn't collapse. For 1 second, holding that coat, I felt like I was holding someone. I put it down on the bench and stepped back and stood there in the aisle and listened to the bus. The engine was off. The lights were on. I always did walkthroughs with the interior lights on. The depot lot hummed outside. And the bus was silent in a way that felt patient, like it was waiting for me to leave so it could go back to whatever it had been doing. I finished the walkthrough. I tagged the coat. I noted it on the sheet. I went back to the dispatch office and I sat there for about 20 minutes, not doing anything. The coat bothered me in a way I couldn't get around. I kept thinking about the shoulders, the way it held its shape. I went back out to the bus. I don't know what I expected. The coat was still on the bench where I'd put it. The bus was still empty. But, and this is the part where I need you to understand, I am not someone who sees things that aren't there. I am not someone who drinks on the job. I am not on medication. I have never had a psychiatric episode. When I looked at the back of the bus from the front, standing at the top of the entry steps, I could see that the seat next to where the coat was laying had a depression in it. The cushion was compressed. Like someone was sitting there, like someone heavy was sitting there right now. I stood and watched it. The depression didn't change. It didn't fill back in. It was just occupied. I stared at it for probably 30 seconds, which is a long time to stare at a bus seat. And then I stepped back off the bus and closed the doors using the exterior panel and walked back to the dispatch office. In the morning, when the day crew came in, I told Marcus, he's the morning yard lead, that the 313 bus needed a seat inspection on the rear bench, that the cushion seemed damaged and wasn't returning to shape. He said he'd flag it for maintenance. I don't know if they ever looked at it. I didn't follow up. After the coat, the items kept coming. But they changed. They got more personal. A pocket watch, tarnished, with the chain still attached. A pair of shoes, men's, placed side by side under a seat as if the owner had taken them off to rest his feet. A handkerchief, monogrammed. The letters were EWH or EWR. The stitching was too worn to tell. A small photograph in a thin metal frame, face down on a seat. I turned it over. It showed a house I didn't recognize. A 2-story farmhouse, white, with a porch that wrapped around the side. There were no people in the photograph, just the house and the yard, and what might have been a road in the background. Each item was warm. Each item smelled faintly of that same complex scent. The wood, the wool, the sweet organic something underneath. Each time, the bus was empty. I started dreading the 313 walkthrough, not in a panicked way, in a slow, heavy way, like the way you dread a meeting you know is going to be bad. My body would tighten up around 12:30 when I knew the bus was due. I'd watch it pull in under the lot lights, and I'd feel something in my chest that wasn't fear. Exactly, it was more like reluctance. Like some part of me knew that every time I stepped onto that bus, I was participating in something I didn't understand and hadn't agreed to. But I did it every night because it's my job. That's the thing people don't understand about jobs like this. You don't stop doing the thing because it feels wrong. You stop doing the thing when someone with authority tells you the procedure has changed. No one told me the procedure had changed. In November, I started noticing the depression in the seats more regularly. Not always the back bench anymore. Sometimes a seat in the last few rows. Always on the left side, I realized. Always by the window. And not always visible at first. Sometimes I'd walk the aisle and everything would look normal. And then on my way back toward the front, I'd glance over my shoulder and see it. A seat compressed as if someone had just sat down in the time it took me to pass. I never saw it happen. I want to be precise about that. I never watched a seat compress. I never saw movement. I just saw the result. Always behind me, always just at the edge of where I'd already looked. I tried something one night. I did my walkthrough front to back as usual, but instead of turning around and walking back up the aisle, I stepped off through the rear emergency door. I walked around the outside of the bus and re-entered through the front. And there it was. A depression in a window seat, left side, about 4 rows from the back. Fresh, defined, the size and weight impression of a full-grown adult. I stood there in the aisle, maybe 15 feet from it. And I said, out loud, and I'm not proud of this, it sounds insane. I said, I can see where you're sitting. Nothing happened. The bus didn't change. The air didn't shift. There was no response. But I swear the quality of the silence changed. It went from empty to held, like someone was holding their breath, like the silence was being maintained on purpose. I left the bus, I closed the doors, I went back to dispatch, and I sat there until my shift ended, and I drove home, and I lay in bed in my apartment, and I listened to the daylight outside my windows, and I did not sleep. After that night, I stopped talking on the bus. I don't mean I stopped addressing whatever I thought might be there. I mean I stopped making any sound at all during the 313 walkthrough. I don't hum on the bus. I don't mutter to myself. I don't even clear my throat. It's not a conscious decision anymore. My body just goes quiet when I board that bus, like it knows something I'm still catching up to. December was bad, not because of any single incident, but because of accumulation. The items kept appearing. The seat depressions kept showing up. The smell got stronger. Not unpleasant, never unpleasant, but thicker, more present. Like walking into a room where someone had been sitting for hours. And I started noticing something else, something I can't fully explain, and that I've gone back and forth on whether to include here because I know how it sounds. The windows on 313 were fogging. Not all of them. Not from condensation in the normal sense. It wasn't particularly cold, and the other buses didn't have the same issue. But on 313, in the back third, the windows would have a faint haze on them by the time I boarded. The kind of fog you get when someone breathes against glass in a warm room. I could see it best from outside the bus, looking in at an angle under the lot lights. The fog was on the inside of the glass. One night, I touched one of the fogged windows. My finger left a clear streak. The moisture was warm. I pulled my hand back and looked at my fingertip, and it was wet, and there was nothing on it. Just water, just moisture. But it was warm, body temperature, warm. And I thought. For the first time, I let myself think the full thought. Someone is riding this bus. Someone I can't see is riding this bus. They get on somewhere along the route, and they ride it to the depot, and they're still on it when I board, and I walk right past them. I didn't panic. I want you to know that. I'm not the kind of person who panics, but I did go sit in my truck for the rest of my shift instead of the dispatch office, and I did lock the doors, and I did leave the engine running so I could drive away if I needed to. Though I couldn't have told you what I'd be driving away from. I thought about quitting. I thought about it seriously for about 2 weeks. I updated my resume. I looked at job listings. But the thing is, and this is going to sound pathetic, or maybe just honest, I'm 44 years old with a GED and 6 years at a transit authority. I'm not walking into something equivalent. The differential, the benefits, the seniority I've built. I'd be starting over. And for what? Because bus seats have dents in them, and I found some old man's coat. I stayed. Of course I stayed. January. This January, I mean just a few months ago. The 313 came in on a Tuesday night, right at 1:05. The driver was a woman named Delgado, relatively new, maybe 2 months on the route. She pulled in fine, stepped off fine, handed me her sheet. But she paused on the way to her car and turned around and said, "Hey, is that bus haunted or something?" She said it with a half smile, like she was making a joke, but also not. I asked her what she meant. She said it was nothing, just that sometimes on the Dutton Road stretch, she'd check her mirror and the interior lights would catch the seats in a way that made it look like someone was sitting in the back. She said she knew no one was there because she'd watched the last passenger get off at Harkin Road. She said it was just the lights and the road and being tired. She said she was joking. I told her the bus was fine. I told her the rural stretch was just dark and weird and she'd get used to it. She nodded and left. I walked the bus. The smell was there, strong that night, like walking into a room full of old furniture and old clothes and something faintly alive underneath all of it. The back 8 rows of seats all had depressions in them. Not one seat. Not 3 seats. Every seat in the last 8 rows on the left side had a compression in the cushion, a bodyweight impression, as if the bus had been carrying a full load of passengers that existed only on one side of the aisle, all the way in the back. I walked the aisle slowly. I counted them. 8 rows, 1 impression per row, all window seats, all left side. 8 invisible passengers, or 1 passenger who sat in 8 seats, or something I don't have a framework for. Under the last seat, the window seat on the back bench, there was a suitcase, a small, hard-sided suitcase, the kind people used to travel with before rolling luggage. Dark brown, scuffed, with brass latches and a leather handle. It was heavy, not extremely heavy, but heavy enough to have things in it. I did not open it. I need you to understand that decision. I am a curious person. I am not a coward. I have opened every bag, every container, every forgotten item on every bus I've walked for 6 years. It's literally part of my job. But I picked up that suitcase and felt the weight shift inside it. Felt objects move, felt the balance change like things were settling. And my hands, completely independent of my brain, set it back down. I tagged it. I noted it on the sheet. I wrote, brown hard side suitcase, rear bench, window side. Heavy, latches closed, route 313. I put it in lost and found with everything else. And I went back to dispatch, and I sat down, and I realized my hands were shaking, not a lot, but enough that I couldn't write clearly for about 10 minutes. The suitcase was gone the next morning, not claimed. Gone. I checked the lost and found log. My entry was there. Date, time, description, bus number. But the suitcase wasn't in the bin. It wasn't anywhere in the dispatch building. I asked Marcus if the day crew had moved it. He checked. No one had touched it. No one had signed it out. I went back through the log, and this is when I realized something that should have occurred to me much sooner, and the fact that it didn't tells you something about how gradually this crept up on me. None of the items I'd logged from 313 were in lost and found. Not the glasses, not the scarf, not the glove, not the Bible, not the pocket watch, not the shoes, not the photograph, not the coat. None of them. My log entries were all there. Dates, descriptions, bus numbers, my initials. But every physical item was gone. The bin that should have held months of 313 lost and found items was empty. I am not a person who loses track of things. That is specifically what my job requires me not to do. I log items, I place items, I note locations. The items were there when I logged them. I held them in my hands. They were warm. I don't know where they went. I don't know when they went. I don't know if they left on their own, or if someone took them, or if they were never fully. I don't know. I don't know how to finish that sentence. I started keeping a personal notebook after that. Not an official log. Just a pocket notebook. The kind you buy at the drugstore. Every night that 313 came in, I'd write down exactly what I found, where I found it, what condition it was in, and what the bus felt like. I know what the bus felt like isn't a professional metric. I don't care. I needed a record that was mine. February. The items kept coming. The seat depressions kept forming. But something else started, and this is the part that I've had the hardest time with because it involves me in a way that the other stuff didn't. The other stuff, you could argue, was happening to the bus. This started happening to me. I was doing the walkthrough on a Friday night, moving slow, noting things. I was about halfway down the aisle when I felt something I can only describe as proximity. You know the feeling. When someone is close to you, but you haven't seen them yet. The air pressure changes, or the heat changes, or something in your peripheral awareness fires. It's a real thing, not supernatural. It's documented. Your body detects the presence of another person through micro cues you're not conscious of. I felt it on my left side, strong, close. Like someone was sitting in the window seat right next to where I was standing, and I could feel the warmth of their body through the gap between the seat back and the partition. I looked. The seat was empty, but the cushion was compressed, and the air beside me was warm. Not bus warm, body warm. Specific, located, directional. Warm from exactly where someone's torso would be if they were sitting in that seat. I left. I didn't finish the walkthrough. For the first and only time in 6 years, I did not complete a walkthrough. I wrote on the sheet that the bus appeared clear, and I signed it and I filed it, and I went outside and stood in the cold for 10 minutes, breathing like I'd been running. The next night, I finished the walkthrough, and the night after that. And every night since. I don't skip. I won't let myself skip, because if I start skipping, then the fear is in charge, and I'm just a person who's afraid, and I can't. I can't be that. I need this job. I need to be functional for this job. But I feel it now, almost every time. The proximity, the warmth. It moves. Not quickly, not dramatically. But over the course of the walkthrough, it shifts, like someone is slowly changing seats to stay near me, or to stay just behind me. I've never felt it in front of me. It's always to the side or just behind, like it's following me up the aisle. In March, I found a new item, not on the seat, on the floor near the front of the bus, just inside the fare box area. It was a transit pass, an old one. Not the current plastic card style, but a paper monthly pass, the kind the authorities stopped issuing in 2009. It was laminated, or had been once. The lamination was peeling. The pass was dated November 1987. The name on it was partially illegible. I could make out a first initial, E, and what might have been Waring or Warwick, or something starting with War. The photo was a small black and white headshot of a man, middle-aged, with a thin face and glasses. Wireframe glasses, small lenses. The kind I'd found on the bus back in August. I stared at that photo for a long time. The man looked ordinary, unremarkable. He had the kind of face you'd forget immediately if you passed him on the street. But something about the expression. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't frowning, he was just looking at the camera with a kind of patient stillness that reminded me of the silence on the bus. That held silence, that purposeful quiet. I put the pass in my pocket, not in lost and found, in my pocket. I still have it. It's in the drawer of my nightstand, and I check that it's there every day when I wake up. Because after what happened with the other items, I needed to know that at least one thing would stay. It stayed. It's still there. I don't know if that's because I took it home, off the bus, away from the depot, or if it's because it was meant for me. I don't like either explanation. I tried to research the name. I tried E. Waring and E. Warwick, and every variation I could think of, combined with Grayfield, combined with the Dutton Road corridor, combined with Brayburn Estates, combined with Route 313. I didn't find much. There was an Edward Warwick listed in a county property record from 1991, connected to an address on Dutton Road that I couldn't map because the numbering system changed when the road was reclassified in 2003. There was an obituary for an Edwin Waring in a church bulletin from 2014, but it was from a church 2 counties over, and the details were sparse. Just a name, an age, 78, and a note that he was a long-time transit rider and a quiet man. That last part felt like it was written about my bus, about my walkthrough. But it could be anyone. It could be nobody. I'm not going to pretend I solved anything. I didn't. The research was a dead end dressed up as progress, and I knew it at the time, but I did it anyway, because the alternative was just sitting with the not knowing, and the not knowing was starting to interfere with my ability to function. Here is where I am now. It's April. I still work nights. I still do the walkthroughs. Route 313 still comes in last, every night, and I still board it within 30 seconds of the driver stepping off. And I still walk the aisle front to back, and I still find items that are warm and personal and impossible, and I still feel the presence beside me, shifting, following, patient. The other night, last Thursday, something happened that I haven't told anyone yet. I was doing the walkthrough, halfway down the aisle. The proximity feeling was there, strong on my left. I was moving slowly, checking under seats, when I heard something. It was faint, barely there. If the depot compressor had been running, I'd have missed it entirely. But the compressor cycles off around 12:45 most nights, and the lot was quiet. It was breathing. Not mechanical breathing, not air system noise, not the bus settling. It was breath. Slow, measured, slightly wet, the way an older person breathes when they're resting. In, and then a pause, and then out, with a faint rasp at the end of the exhale. It was coming from the seat to my left, the empty seat with the compressed cushion, and the warmth that had no source. I stood completely still. The breathing continued. In, pause, out, rasp, in, pause, out, rasp, steady, calm, not labored, not aggressive, not ghostly in any way that matched what I would have expected if I'd ever imagined this moment. It sounded like someone resting, someone comfortable, someone who'd been riding a long time and was used to the motion and the sound and the routine of the bus, and was resting now because the ride was over. I counted 7 breaths before I moved. Then I walked the rest of the aisle without stopping, and I stepped off the front of the bus and I closed the doors. I went to dispatch. I sat down. I wrote in my notebook, Thursday, 313, breathing, left side, row 9 from rear. Approximately 7 breaths audible, rhythmic, elderly male pattern, no visual. I underlined no visual twice. I finished my shift. I drove home. I went to bed. I slept, actually, which surprised me. I think I've passed through some kind of barrier where fear would be useful and come out the other side into something else. Acceptance isn't the right word. Coexistence, maybe. I don't know. I haven't heard the breathing again since Thursday, but the items keep coming. Last night, it was a bus schedule. A paper schedule, folded, from 1994. Route 313. The route map was almost identical to the current one, except there was a stop marked on Dutton Road that doesn't exist anymore. The stop was labeled Warwick Crossing. I'd never heard of it. I drove out there on my day off. Found the spot based on the map's proportions. There's nothing there. A wide spot in the road, some gravel, a drainage ditch. No sign, no shelter, no indication a bus ever stopped there. But there's a concrete pad, about 4 feet by 6 feet, set back from the road, about 10 feet, overgrown with grass and half buried. The kind of pad a bus stop sign would have been mounted on. I stood on it. I stood there in the daylight, on my day off, on a Tuesday afternoon, and I felt absolutely nothing. No presence, no warmth, no dread. Just gravel and weeds and cars passing on Dutton Road. Whatever it is, it's on the bus. It stays on the bus. It rides the route and it comes back to the depot and it sits in the dark with its coat and its glasses and its 40-year-old transit pass. And it breathes and it waits, and I don't know what it's waiting for. I don't know if it knows the route changed. I don't know if it knows the stop is gone. I don't know if it knows it's dead. If it is dead. If dead is even the right framework for what's happening. I know this. Every night I board that bus, the presence is a little more defined. The warmth is a little warmer. The proximity is a little closer. The items are a little more personal. It's been progressing slowly, patiently, like someone who has all the time in the world. Because maybe it does, and I think it's aware of me now. In a way, it wasn't before. I think speaking to it that night, saying, "I can see where you're sitting, changed something, established something. I was part of the route now, part of the pattern." 3 nights ago, I finished the walkthrough and stepped off the bus and was closing the doors from the exterior panel, and the interior lights were still on, and I looked through the glass of the front door as it shut. There was a handprint on the inside of the glass. 4 fingers and a thumb, slightly smeared, as if someone had pressed their hand to the door as it closed. It hadn't been there when I stepped off. I'd looked at that glass panel from the inside less than 5 seconds earlier. The handprint was lower than mine would be, smaller. An older person's hand, maybe. The fingers were thin. I watched the handprint sit there on the glass. Then the interior lights clicked off on their automatic timer, and I couldn't see it anymore. In the morning, I checked. The glass was clean. I still have the transit pass. I look at the photo sometimes before I go to sleep. The thin face, the wire-frame glasses, the patient expression. I think about what it's like to ride the same route for decades after your stop no longer exists. I think about what it means to come back every night to a depot that doesn't know you're there. I think about that held breath, that purposeful silence, that warmth in an empty seat. I think about the handprint on the glass, the hand pressing against the door as it closed. And I realize I don't know if it was trying to get out, or if it was saying goodbye, or if it was reaching for me. Every night I go back. Every night 313 comes in. Every night I walk the aisle and I feel it there, and I log what I find, and I close the doors and I go home. I've started leaving the porch light on at my apartment, which I never used to do. Not because I'm afraid of the dark, but because when I get home at 2 a.m. after walking that bus, I need to see my own door clearly. I need to see that the glass is clean. I need to see that the warmth on the handle is just from the sun earlier that day, trapped in the metal, fading. It's always fading by the time I get there. But some mornings I stand on my porch with my key in my hand, and I wait just for a second to make sure.